Velkommen til Markedsføringspodden med Eivind og Eivind. Podcasten for deg som vil lære mer om salg og markedsføring.
Hver uke leverer vi deg våre beste tips som du kan ta i bruk i din bedrift for å øke synlighet og salget.
Hei og velkommen til denne ukens episode av Markedsføringspodden. Mitt navn er Ødegård, og denne uken har Eivind og jeg hatt besøk i studio. Vi fikk besøk av en kar som heter Macdonald. Han jobber i Tallinn i Estland. Han er fra England, og han er en av kanskje verdens aller beste på dette med innholdsmarkedsføring, eller content marketing. Han har jobbet med digital markedsføring siden 2005, og har vært nominert til en rekke priser av anerkjente firmaer, og han har blant annet jobbet med Superoffice, der han har vært med å lage bloggen deres, Superoffice-bloggen, som i dag genererer over 2 millioner besøk hvert eneste år, og har samlet over 10 000 leads som de har brukt til å generere nye kunder. Så Steven er definitivt en som kan utrolig mye om dette med innholdsmarkedsføring. I dagens episode skal vi gå gjennom Facebook-testen, som er en test Steven har for hvordan du finner ut om du har laget bra eller dårlig innhold. Steven forteller oss hvordan han genererte linker fra noen av verdens største nettsider, og han forteller strategien Superoffice har brukt for å lage denne suksessfulle bloggen. Så hvis du har lyst til å lære mer om det, og lyst til å lære mer om innholdsmarkedsføring, så må du høre videre nå.
I dag skal vi snakke om innholdsmarkedsføring, og vi har i dag besøk av en ekspert på dette området som heter Macdonald. Han har jobbet med digital markedsføring siden 2005. Han jobber blant annet med noe som heter Superoffice. Vi skal snakke enda mer om det. Han har også vært omtalt i Adobe, Entrepreneur, Inc. Magazine, Smart Insights, og har også vært nominert for beste SEO-kampanje og beste SEO-team i Europa. I tillegg til dette har han også vært nominert som beste content marketing campaign i Nord-Amerika. Så her har vi med oss en skikkelig ekspert på området, så det blir spennende å høre fra Steven. Vi kjører på.
Steven, welcome to Markedsføringspodden.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more to our audience who might not be familiar with you and your work?
Sure. I am a Brit based in Estonia, a digital marketer. My early career started off as door-to-door salesman. Then I moved into customer service and then into marketing. I've worked with online gambling companies, payday loan companies, but then some companies that are not so careful, keep me up at night, companies that do A/B testing software, a lot of B2B companies nowadays. And most of my time now is spent working on SEO and content marketing with Superoffice, the company that you just mentioned.
Yeah, right.
So what made you transition from customer service to marketing?
Luckily, it was my knowledge of English. When I was in customer service, I was doing email replies, and this is back in 2007. I started. I was working for a Scandinavian gambling company. I was the highest rated email response guy there, but only because of my language skills. In terms of response times, they weren't that so good. And from there, I was offered the role of a content manager. Now, back then, that was basically what today is a web admin or someone who just uploads content into a CMS, as opposed to maybe a content manager today, which is maybe content marketing manager, right? So I started managing websites, just making sure content was uploaded and it was proofread. Back then it was over 125 sites in this one network that I was managing. And from there I started then learning how to very basically update web sites through HTML, update copy, seeing changes live on a website. And from there I started sending out emails as well as part of that job responsibility. So that's how I got into very early into marketing. And that was around 2007. So a long time ago.
Time flies, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So how do you think like your job is changed as someone who still works with content from now than working with content 10 years ago?
So 10 years ago, my job was basically update content based on someone's request, right? So let's say one company wanted to launch a campaign. They would send me the copy. Then I would go into the CMS, which a lot of online gambling companies use in-house built CMSs. So they're not something you just get off the shelf, quite basic. But basically you just, update the copy. They agree that everything's okay, and that's it. So just content admin, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today, my job is creating the copy and making sure it's optimized for search, making sure, that the OG tags are set up for social. So when you share on social, the right images and copy displays there, to the whole promotion of the campaign as well, and the reporting. So it's a lot more in-depth than what it used to be, just a kind of copy and paste guy. That's essentially what it used to be, copy and paste. Now it's full marketing campaigns, I would say.
So what is a normal day like for you at work?
Well, today I travel to Oslo, right? So it's been every day is like that. I start my day pretty much exactly the same every morning, and that is I check the Superoffice blog to see if it's up and live, and make sure nothing has been taken down. But second, I then run through a suite of tools to see what kind of new links we've acquired, the traffic levels, the shares, maybe the recent shares, and then look for changes in keyword rankings, just so then perhaps there's an opportunity to then focus on updating existing copy to then improve those rankings further, or then see if we've had a dip, how we can recapture those previous rankings.
So you start your day with a lot of analysis, right?
Sure. It's I'd probably say the first 30 to 45 minutes is spent on that every day. I start with checking Ahrefs, Moz's OSE for new links. I do a Google search as well for the last 24 hours to see what kind of brand mentions have come through. I use mention.com as well for other ways to find links and brand mentions. I go onto Twitter, I search for the URL in Twitter search, check my own Twitter feed as well while I'm there.
Cool.
And then finally, when the clock ticks into 10 o'clock Tallinn time, I then check Google Analytics, because for some reason the time zone is set, I think, in the US. So when I log in, I don't see the previous days. I have to wait a bit, and I've just been too lazy to change.
So this is your everyday routine, every day, right?
Every day, Monday to Friday, yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
It's because what I've learned is, and I'm very fortunate, that the website does attract links from big sites. There's nothing better than going in, starting your day and seeing a link from HubSpot, like what I had this morning.
Right.
When you start your day with a link from HubSpot, you're like, it's going to be a good day.
For those of the listeners who are not familiar with why links are so important for a blog, do you mind explaining a little bit about that?
Sure. So Google has, the theory is that there's over 200 ranking factors. Most likely there is more than that. And this includes things like links. If one website links to another site, that Google treats that as a way of saying, okay, this site A is saying site B is trustworthy, right? I'm simplifying it now, but in essence, that's one way of saying. And Google came out last year and actually said that links and content are the two most important ranking factors. There are other things as well, like site speed. There are things like freshness of content. There's things like crawlability and making sure that pages can be read by the Google bot and Google's to get pages indexed for Google search. But the more, and very again, just simplifying it, the more links you have to a website, the higher you will most likely rank.
So what's the best way to attract good links to your website?
So I haven't done really any active link building for the Superoffice blog, except for publishing unique research. I found that to be unquestionably the most valuable way to attract links from big sites than any tactic that I've read about or tried to implement in the past on other sites. The Superoffice blog attracts backlinks and links naturally because of something we started years ago when we first set it up. And that was to be a resource that people will turn to when they want to provide further information for their own audience. And what I mean by that is if, for example, you can write a piece of content on Facebook, right? Let's say you talk about Facebook, and the opening sentence is, many people use Facebook, ... and you continue with your copy, right? But if you switch that around and say Facebook has 1.2 billion active users, right? That becomes a statistic. So when someone on the web is also writing about Facebook, they might say, I wonder how many people actually use Facebook. Let me search to find that out. And if our content ranks high for that search, they will then list us as a source. So that's how we've grown links naturally over the last been 6 years now on the blog. But in terms of unique research, that was something that made the links go from, let's say, 20 to 30 a day to potentially hundreds per day. And the unique research that we've done in the past is to analyze how companies respond to customer service inquiries, how companies send email marketing campaigns, and how companies manage their live chat on their website.
Cool. So let's talk a bit about Superoffice. What is Superoffice for those who isn't familiar with?
It's a CRM software provider. Headquarters are in Oslo. Have offices all around Europe, and it's highly regarded as the world's most user-friendly CRM system.
That's cool. So you have been running the Superoffice blog now for 5 or 6 years?
Since it started, yeah. The blog was launched officially in August 2012.
What was the reason for launching the blog?
My guess is why most companies launch a blog, because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah. But since then, you had over 4 million visits to the Superoffice blog, right?
That's right. That's right.
So while most businesses launch a blog because everyone else is doing it, they get 100 visitors and then it stops and people stop blogging. What do you think is the success factors behind you being able to generate that many visitors and keep going for such a long time?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point you bring up. A lot of companies start a blog, they wait maybe 8 to 10 months and expect then that's when the traffic flows in. And it doesn't, so they give up. They focus their time on something else, because creating great content, I'm not talking good or mediocre content, creating great content can take days, right? And when your boss is saying, okay, I want you to create a new blog post, you've got 2 hours, the quality of that piece isn't going to be that good, right? So what happens is they put out mediocre content because of time, resources, budgets, you name it. And then after 8 to 10 months, they quit. At the Superoffice blog, we had the same thing. 8 to 10 months, there was very little, nothing really moved. The needle barely budged. It wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years we really started to see it take off. So what made it a success? I would say really a commitment from the top part of the company, you know, saying we want to keep this blog running. We don't want to just, let it die, but also we want to create value in the CRM industry that no one else really is doing right now. For example, the two companies, there's a lot of CRM blogs by I would call the traditional experts in CRM who were very big consultants in the 90s, and they've grown with CRM since it first came about. And they blog about their experience as being consultants and helping, maybe enterprise companies implement. But it's very sometimes high level and strategic content. Sometimes as well, it's infrequent. They don't have a consistent schedule. Versus you have someone like Salesforce, which is one of the most well-known CRM companies, who put out 4 or 5 pieces of content on their blog per day, and that's difficult to keep up with, right? That's like it's like news articles basically, even though they're not. So what we did differently is we said, okay, we're going to publish content. Just let me take a few steps back. When we first published content, it was very much product oriented, okay? And for the first 6 months, it was all about why Superoffice is great, what you can do with Superoffice, what you can do to save time with Superoffice, all these sort of product hacks. And in January 2013, that was when I came across a study by SERP IQ that basically came out and said long-form content ranks really well. I think it was on the Quick Sprout blog where I first came about it, Neil Patel's blog. Yeah. And he referenced the SERP IQ study, and it said on average, web pages with 1,800 words rank in the top 10 of Google. So that was part of our shift in a strategy straight away. Okay, stop writing 500 word blog posts and switch to 1,500 to 1,800 words. And then second, provide value, not just about product. Forget it being about me and about Superoffice, about us. But let's just think about, the reader. We wanted the reader to read a piece of content and within seconds be able to transfer that information into their company. Whether it was an email study we launched that said most companies send emails at Tuesday afternoons. We recommend you should send an email on Wednesday mornings. Just an example. But that would mean if it was Tuesday afternoon, they're about to send an email, maybe they thought, wait a second, I'm going to try tomorrow and test it instead. And that kind of information tied in with what I mentioned earlier about the statistics is what I think made Superoffice successful. Being different from what everyone else is doing in the industry, writing long-form content, and providing actionable content.
That's really good advice for everyone starting a blog, I think, to actually provide a lot of information and valuable information. Because as you said, you have like sites like HubSpot and Salesforce that are writing 4 to 5 articles a day. So there are so much content now on the web, and especially like in the B2B world about this kind of subjects. So it's really hard to stand out, and you maybe really need to take the time to write really good content. And one thing I've noticed about Superoffice is you post once a month. And not 4 to 5 times a day. Is that a strategy you guys have, or is it you enjoying not working as much?
Yeah. So, this is crazy to think, right? But in the beginning when we launched, so the goal, this is just before I came on board, right? But the goal was 3 times a week. Okay, 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The challenge is when you don't have a team of writers or a team of people even who love to write, you then, with those expectations, have to start tracking people down. And the funny story, there's the CMO of Superoffice, Jennifer Lund. She tells me a story about how in the beginning they had this huge workshop where all the people who said, yeah, I would like to write for the Superoffice blog in the beginning, they came to the workshop, they brainstormed ideas, and after the first round, when everyone wrote one piece, then they kind of realized, wait, I'm not getting paid extra for this. This is something I have to do now on my own time. And the story is Jennifer was having to hunt down the writers to make sure that they could finish the content in time because of the harsh deadlines, right? 3 times a week is no joke.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And back then, she was the one who was uploading everything into WordPress. Because, that's the one thing, right? If you say to someone, can you write? That's a big deal. But then you ask them to upload it into WordPress and any other CMS and optimize it. That's a whole another deal. So when we read this study by SERPIQ about long-form content, we then said twice a month. That was in 2013. So we cut down dramatically because we realized creating good piece of content isn't easy. Over the years, we've found that the less we publish, the better we perform.
Why do you think that happens?
I believe it's because we then invest more time in content promotion.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's very easy if you have a high frequency publishing schedule where you're publishing 2 to 3 times a week, you're spending more time on the content production side rather than the promotion.
How much of the time you spend do you think is on content promotion versus content creation?
So in the beginning, I would say I probably spent half and half, right? So I'd spend maybe 2 to 3 days creating it, and then 2 to 3 days promoting it, and then I would spend whatever was left of my time to then analyze the performance.
Yeah.
I think now with tools like Buffer, right, where you can schedule social sharing, the content promotion is forever. Basically, if I create a piece of content, I will spend the next 3 days hard promoting it. And once that kind of initial spike has calmed down, then you use these kind of tools to then continue to promote it without having to then remember yourself, oh, I need to go back and share this article, or I need to do this with this article. So yeah, it's always ongoing.
Yeah, cool. Looking back on this whole Superoffice blog, what would you have done differently the first year?
Good question. So I think, without a doubt, we wouldn't have had such an ambitious goal of publishing so much content early on. To switch that on, what would I do differently? I would have said, find people who love to write, and then ask them to contribute, right? Because it's hard work. If you're a full-time job being paid as a developer, and you want to write, you have this itch to just write about something that you're passionate about, then that's fine. Take that. But then the content on the blog in the early days was about software development. You wouldn't find that now in Google. Actually, a lot of the early posts, I really hope these guys aren't listening because they'll know. But a lot of the early posts have had to be no indexed.
Right.
Because they just unfortunately didn't add value to where we are now. So I would say we have about 250 posts in total, and only about 160 or so are actually searchable in Google.
What's the reason for that?
The strategy wasn't the same then as it is today, which is super valuable content that is evergreen, that is has a keyword in mind that has a high search volume. A good example is in the beginning we talked about some kind of software development and things like that, which our audience isn't necessarily searching for. But also some of the search volume is quite low as well. So even if we dominated the search results, you're only getting 5-10 visits a month. And I would rather Google crawl a piece of content that is in the top 10.
Yeah.
And hopefully then, by promoting that content further, increase in rankings than spending time searching and crawling pages that just haven't been updated in several years. So I go back to the original question, what would I do differently?
Yeah.
I would have a team of writers who love contribute in the beginning, but also not have such a aggressive schedule. And now as well, of course, if I could go back and start again or create a new blog, knowing with the experience I'd have, I would definitely focus more on the promotion aspect. In fact, now I'd probably say, if we can get a great writer or two to create content, then let's say it takes 1 to 2 days, you spend the rest of your week promoting it. And I've seen teams as well split that role up. I myself do both, right? I write and I promote. But I've seen some companies, Ahrefs being one of them, they say they have a separate team who promote it versus the writers. And that's an interesting split. I haven't seen too many cases of that.
Right. So what's your promotion strategy?
So the easiest thing, or the first thing that we do, is we inform people internally. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of companies forget to do. Each time a new blog post is live, we then share an email with the team and say, hey guys, a new post is live. And we learned this because people kept asking us, oh, there's a new blog post live. When did that go live? And I'm like, 2 weeks ago. You don't check the blog? And they're like, not really. We don't just go to visit the blog to see if there's new content. Most people sign up to a newsletter list, or they follow a company on social media and they'll see it there. So what we did was we said, okay, well, how about we just send an email to everyone once it's live? So that's the first thing, just informing employees and colleagues, right? Because when they get that content, the natural thing that they do is share it, right? And my LinkedIn connections, for example, are very different to yours, right? So all of a sudden, instead of just sharing it with mine and having 500 people that's too ambitious. Maybe 5 people like it. If the two of you share it as well, then that's maybe 15 people, who have actually liked it or commented or engaged with it, right?
Yeah.
So the reach is a lot higher. And although it's a sore spot, we used to have a huge email list, and unfortunately now we don't. But that was one of the best things about the blog, was growing an email list. There was over 10,000 subscribers at one point. Now it's about 100. So the email isn't as effective as it once was.
Yeah.
But for sure, that's, I'm sure you guys are big on email marketing. It must be drilled into you.
Yeah, Markedsføringspodden has 24 subscribers on our newsletter. So.
I really.
Yeah.
But you know what's funny? So in the early days when the blog had 3 subscribers, I was sending an email, right, every time there was new content live.
Yeah.
And of course, people would say, why are you spending time sending an email to 3 subscribers? Why not just, just put it on social and hope they like it? And I think it's those early subscribers who've been with me for the longest time are probably the ones who are still in that 100 now.
Yeah, probably.
Than the ones who signed up. I mean, the companies that signed up to the blog were amazing. There was like Coca-Cola, Virgin Atlantic, like customer service managers from these companies looking to learn and find out tips on how to manage their departments. Bentley, Emirates, companies like this was amazing. Like, how on earth did they find our content? But those companies, they're no longer on our list.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope it's not because the value has dropped.
So you talked a little bit earlier about creating quality content versus mediocre content. How do you know when your content is high quality versus mediocre? Yeah.
So something I apparently said, which I don't really remember, was the Facebook test, right? And what I mean by this is, in the early days, I would say if I was to create a piece of content for a company and I was proud of it, I would share it with my Facebook friends.
Right.
And that's what I called the Facebook test. And that's because if you share a piece of content with your friends or family, or in my case, my mother or my sister who are in my friend list, if they didn't like it, they're the people who will tell me, what is this rubbish?
The honest ones, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be direct in their feedback. What are you babbling on about now? That kind of feedback. So I thought, if I can publish it there with the people that I know will be harsh and still get positive comments.
Yeah, and be proud about it.
Then I would say that's what matters most, right? That's where you can say you're happy with it. Now, of course, what I think is great content is going to be very different from what you think is great content or anyone else thinks is great content, right? But being proud of a piece, I think, is one step in that direction. But of course, content is reviewed at Superoffice. For the first few years, it was basically an email to the CMO. What do you think of this piece? Great, let's launch it.
Yeah.
Now there is an editor who goes through and just improves it, not just in terms of grammar and, even I make spelling mistakes, even though I'm a native Brit. But things like, angles, making sure the angle of the content is right. Headlines, that's so important. We had a rule very early on as well, just going back to what made things different. We now write a minimum of 5 headlines per piece because it's one of the throwaway things you can do as a writer is not care about the headline because that's what most people see.
Yeah, that's true.
So just spending that little bit of time coming up with 4 different alternatives is enough because I think it was Upworthy. I read a case study on Upworthy.com where the founder said they write 25 headlines.
Yeah, I read it as well. That's crazy.
That's we're not at that level, but then again, they have millions of. I think they're one of the fastest growing sites in terms of visits. Back when I read this case study, so we have 5 headlines, and just having someone now to bounce this back and forth. Maybe the 5 still aren't good enough, but it's just put in these sort of almost like mini hurdles before you publish it to make it better each time. Of course, there comes a point though when you have to say, okay, let's just get out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you test those 5 headlines, or is it just like an internal discussion of which one we think is the best one?
Yeah, it's not really a round table. Sometimes it's just one of us saying, let's just go with that.
Yeah.
And that works. I don't think the only testing we've done is email.
Yeah.
So we actually test subject lines based on our headlines to see then if the response rates to our email are good, then we might change the subject line that we took and use that as a headline.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah, one of the best performing headlines we had was on customer experience, and I think we had it was about 40 or 50% open rate and 20-30% click-through rate, and taking then the exact subject line we use there and then applying that as now the headline of the blog post, and it still continues to rank really well and get shared a lot as well. That was nice because the previous headline we used, I don't think did it justice. There's little things like that. There's not a process, unfortunately, for this, especially now as we only have 100 subscribers. It'll take a long time, I think, before we get any valid data, and by that point we're already on to the next piece.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So what's the biggest kind of hurdles or challenges that you have had to go through with the Superoffice blog?
So in the beginning, there was quite a restriction on what we covered. It was a CRM blog, but we were able to touch topics like sales, email marketing, and customer service. And in the very beginning, it was quite strict even then on those kind of areas we wrote about. Processes, strategies, they were out of the question, because we at the time were targeting like smaller companies, right? That's why we're basically writing for the end user. You know, when we talk about email marketing, we're giving tips on when to send an email, which is the email marketing manager or the marketing assistant, right, who's going in. The strategy, the high level, the CMOs, the CEOs, they weren't part of what we were writing for. So it was quite restricted in the beginning, but over time has now more expanded. And yeah, now we cover all kinds of topics, from even social selling. Sales was a tough one. I coming from a background in customer service, I know the challenges. So it's very easy to write about that. I mean, I've been on the floor both in terms of answering calls and responding by email. So I know that a lot of people, a lot of companies, when they respond to customer service emails, they just use a sticky pad to keep track, or they have a shared inbox in Outlook. And that's maybe okay for the short term, but over time you need to change that, maybe use a a system that can automate a lot of these processes. Email marketing, again, I'm a marketer, so I've sent emails to hundreds or even tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I know the process. I've used several different tools. But yeah, the sales topics, except for being a door-to-door sales guy very early on, and I was rubbish at it.
What did you sell?
So bizarrely, we went round selling charity subscriptions. I don't know if that's the correct term, right? And I'm sure it was some kind of pyramid scheme that was illegal back then. But basically, we went door to door and asked people to share their personal information. I mean, it's definitely not GDPR compliant nowadays, that's for sure. But they would fill in a piece of paper with their name, contact details, address, and their banking information. And they would then donate £1.50 a month or something. And if we signed that, we'd get paid, bizarrely, we'd get paid £15, because it was back in the UK, per sign-up.
Yeah.
So, and I was absolutely terrible. I lasted like 3.5 days. And it was just crazy. Not something, actually, no, I was going to say not something I recommend, but it's definitely part of building character. To go to the door and people tell you a lot of things. Have you done door-to-door sales?
No. I'm lucky to not have done that.
Okay. Well, I don't know how it is here in Norway, but in the UK, you get met with some very angry people.
I guess it's
the same
here. Yeah.
Yeah, they call you all kinds of names.
So what's the process you use when coming up for new ideas for blog posts and researching those subjects?
Sure. So in the beginning, the process, we would basically brainstorm between a group of maybe 2-3 people, ideas. Now, because the blog has got a lot of traffic, there's a lot of visibility, gets tons of links, and is doing really, really well, the process has become a lot more simpler. So now, if we say, okay, what we're going to write about next, now we just type in mega competitive keywords in Google and run some keyword research and decide which one has the most search volume and go after that. Because our goal in the beginning was long form, highly practical, data-driven content. Now it's create the best piece of content on that topic online, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, one thing we're looking at now is a piece of content on SaaS, right? Software as a service. So the search volume there is between 70 and 100,000 searches a month across several different SEO tools. That's a big keyword to go after, and there's a lot of competition. But that's what also makes it interesting. You know, can we outperform the Oracles, the IBMs who are ranking for this, or even the Salesforces and HubSpots who are going after that keyword? So then you have the keyword in mind. Okay, so how do you do the research? What are we looking to write? Well, then it's just a Google search, look at the top 10 pieces of content and just think, okay, how can we do better than any of those 10? And sometimes it is looking at, maybe site A has a nice breakdown of what SaaS is. So we think, okay, maybe we should include that, explain to people who are new to the piece, what is SaaS, what does it stand for? Then it's another one is maybe there's some benefits, about adopting SaaS and moving to the cloud. Okay, so we'll look at benefits. Well, this site here has 3 benefits to SaaS. Well, that's no good. Maybe we want 10 benefits or 15 benefits. How many benefits are there to really sell someone the idea that they want to go from this solution now to that solution? And visuals as well. We want to include as many visuals as possible. Something the Superoffice blog does very well is not just site statistics, but we also come up with our own charts and visuals as well.
Right.
And there's nothing genius about this in a sense. It's just we see a study and they publish some research. So we take that research, we cite it, but then we just make the visual more appealing and look nicer using our own kind of branded colors as well.
Yeah.
I know a lot of blogs you'll go to, and let's say your color theme or your brand is red and yellow, right? But then you copy in a chart that is blue and bright purple. It's going to be very harsh on the eyes, right, when you look at it. So we want to take that color palette of Superoffices, the red, the white, the gray, and we want to take these charts and mold them into the same colors. So it lifts the piece of content, is visually appealing, but it's also just breaks up the copy as well. We have I would say a kind of basic template. It doesn't work for every piece because sometimes you go more in depth on a topic than others, and sometimes you're writing about a similar topic several times. You don't want to keep rehashing beginner type stuff. So as an example here, we have a piece on customer experience, and we then talk about what is customer experience, right? For people who don't understand or are new to it. We have another piece on statistics from customer experience, and we also mention it there too, but we don't go into too much detail as the previous piece. And then we have another piece on how CRM and customer experience are tied together. We don't really cover it there because by this point, I'm sure the readers, or hope the readers, have gotten enough of idea that we don't want to deep dive into what is customer experience and every piece looks the same. But basically, the approach is this. We start with a challenge. What we want is people to read the first couple of lines and identify with what I'm saying. I want them to nod their head or say, oh yeah, this is me. So for example, with email, I might start by saying, a lot of people send email, but open rates and click-through rates are notoriously low. Are they getting worse? Have you noticed a decline in your engagement rates lately or response rates? If I can get someone to nod and hook them, right, then they're more likely to continue. If I just start waffling on about email marketing and strategies up front, maybe I've lost them already. Maybe they're so new to it, they're like, hang on a minute, what does that mean? What is CTR? And I don't want to do that. So I want to give every reader the chance, if they're new to the topic, to identify with the challenge. So it's the challenge. Then there's going to be a explaining of what it is I'm talking about, just to keep bringing them up to speed. There's going to be why should they care about this topic, and that's usually where the benefits are included. So, for example, if someone says, but why should I care about CRM? And there's a statistic from Nucleus Research that says the ROI on CRM is $5 to every $1 you invest. So as a company, that's worth entertaining already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, we'd then go on to giving the practical advice. So, for example, if it's email marketing, we'd say, okay, here's strategies you can use. Use personalization, segment your email list, A/B test, whether it's subject line and so on. Then you start having the practical information backed by other studies, backed by statistics. And then we always wrap every piece of content in a nice kind of bow with a conclusion, which is something I found Neil Patel doing years ago on his blog. I just thought that's a nice way to end, because some people write final thoughts, some people write something that looks like it's a continuation of the practical advice, and all of a sudden it ends. And going back to when you're writing your thesis or you're writing stuff for school, you kind of end it with a conclusion as well.
Yeah.
And as our content is educational, that sounds like a nice way to end it as well.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You talked about it a bit as well, but what's the biggest mistake you see people make with content marketing today?
I think there's two. One is I think they set the bar too low for their content. In 2019, it's not just great content that does well, it's the best content. I mean, there's a guy called Nick Eubanks who's an SEO guy. I think he's from Philadelphia. And he wrote on Twitter, he commented and said, if you want to rank in the top 10 of Google, you have to ask yourself, does your content deserve to? And I thought that was really smart, because if you're looking at a piece of content and saying, it sucks, but it'll do, and then someone says, where do you rank? And you're like, I'm on page 5. Well, how'd you get to number 1? I don't know. It's not good enough really to get in on page 1. Well, then you don't deserve to. So I thought that was really smart, and creating, setting the bar too low means, you really need to look at it and say, like, in a way, like what we do at Superoffice, if you're going to attempt to write a piece of write on a topic, then ask yourself, can this be the best piece of content on that topic? Aim high, aim a lot higher. And maybe as well, another thing they do is maybe give up too early as well. And this is now a combination, because the management want results fast. And I think I used to say that if you're going to start a blog, you have to wait maybe 6 to 8 months before you see results. I think that's changed now. I would say maybe 1 to 2 years even. So you have to say, as a manager, we're going to start a blog. Let's give it at least 2 years and really commit to it, because it's tough. It's tough. There are millions of blogs. I forget the statistic. There's an old stat from WordPress, 2 million blog posts a day. I think it was even per hour. Maybe now it's per hour.
Yeah, probably.
How can you compete with that? In your given niche or the topic you're writing about, you're competing with potentially 10, 50, 100 if you're in a really aggressive or highly competitive market, pieces of content you're writing about at the same time at any given moment. So to fight that, you need to aim really high. And a lot of companies as well, we mentioned this I think before, but they'll just publish it and hope for the best. They'll click publish. That's another checklist on their tasks they've done. Now on to the next thing. And if you look at a lot of, I have access to quite a few Google Analytics accounts, and I can see when companies invest in content promotion and when they don't. And that's when you see this spike on day 1 of content for visits, and then it's just flat lines after that. And if every piece you do delivers those kind of results, then you have to change. You have to do something different. Because it's not going to be, you can't justify it then. And that's when you hear companies say, content marketing doesn't work for us.
Right. So that was a good list of things to make sure you don't do.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what would you focus on in 2019?
So something we've experimented with in the last couple of months is ties in with the promotion, which I find really fascinating now, is creating funnels or ad funnels on Facebook. For the longest time, we have kind of neglected Facebook. I don't know whether it's just a Superoffice thing, whether it's a B2B marketing thing. A lot of companies in the B2B space think it's about LinkedIn. That's where your audience is, and Facebook is just where personal use, right?
Yeah.
But in October, we started creating ad funnels based on the blog content. And luckily now we have as I said, we have over 160 posts. So we have a lot of content that covers kind of top of the funnel content right the way down to kind of bottom of the funnel, people ready to buy. So now we have ad funnels set up where, we rank, for example, in Norway, you search for CRM and a Superoffice piece of content is number 1, which is great for the company to have that kind of visibility. So we're getting thousands of visits a month to this piece of content organically. And then we're retargeting everyone who visits that on Facebook with a piece that's slightly down the funnel a little bit more on the benefits of CRM, right? Then we go down to a piece of content on how to choose the right provider when you're looking for a CRM solution. After that, we then offer our first piece of gated content, which is a buyer's guide to CRM, which is basically if anyone's looking to purchase CRM, what to look for. There's vendor questions included. There's KPI templates. It's a great package. And if someone then engages with that, they'll then get a free trial offer. So now it's, instead of spending time trying to actively promote old content, it's now we're letting the Facebook ad funnels run that automatically for us. And we're not spending too much. We're talking $10, $20 a day right now per campaign. But the results we're seeing are hugely positive, that it might be enough that we start shifting budgets from other media into Facebook.
Right. Have you tried the same tactic on LinkedIn or?
No, and I think the reason why is I think LinkedIn's ad setup isn't as flexible as Facebook yet. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
That's correct.
that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, it's I find LinkedIn a lot more expensive. I think
it is.
the click prices are probably 2 to 3 times what we're paying on Facebook. And there was a guy, I forget his name, sorry, but he's known as the LinkedIn ad specialist. He's a US guy. And he said the only way you can really justify LinkedIn ads is if your product is $15,000 or more, right?
Right.
So he said you make it up on the back end, basically.
Yeah.
You have to spend a lot of money, but you have to have a high cost product in order to make it back. That's how you justify it. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, okay, maybe then we should try something different.
Yeah.
But it's notoriously difficult, I think, LinkedIn ads. We have seen some success with gated content, but still, in terms of cost and reach, I think Facebook is performing better for us. So we've now rolled this setup in Norway, Denmark, UK, Sweden, and the Netherlands, and it's performing really well. Another thing we're going to try and do this year is probably a lot more video. Something we tested just again before the end of the year last year was traditionally a new blog post is launched. We then go over to LinkedIn. We maybe copy the email copy that we wrote and use that to write as a post. Or we take the first paragraph of the blog post and put that in the LinkedIn and then add a link and share that. One of the guys in the Netherlands created a video and just said, hey, we have this new blog post. It's all about this, that, and the other. It's really good. Recommend you check it out. And that had really high engagement rates on LinkedIn. One of the best performing posts they've had. So that's something we might start experimenting with too. So it's finding new ways to promote content that traditionally we haven't really looked into, because a lot of what we've done has worked, but now, maybe it's time to start expanding that, because obviously the web is changing, video is huge, and who knows, you might even do some podcasts and create content there.
Yeah, maybe. So we have been talking for 45 minutes already, so maybe it's time to close it up. If people want to know more about you or get in contact with you, where can they find you? So
I am on Twitter. Do you include links?
Yeah,
good. We will post links.
Good, because it's Stephen McDonald. Yeah. So Stephen McDonald was taken, and at the time I thought it was smart to do Stephen McDonald, but we use a 0 instead of an O. Right. But McDonald has like 5 O's.
Yeah.
So trying to explain that is difficult. So on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, please. I don't take anyone, but I think it's if you want to stay ahead and see the latest Superoffice content, then I'm on LinkedIn, or visit the Superoffice blog and subscribe. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights and experience with content marketing and marketing in general. Thank you. Og takk til deg som hører på. Jeg tror det har vært jeg vet det har vært veldig mye nyttig i denne episoden. Så her er det jo bare å plukke ut det beste av de beste rådene og implementere dem allerede i dag. Så takk for at du hører på, og vi høres igjen neste uke. Tusen takk for at du hørte på dagens episode. Vi håper du har lært noe nyttig. Hvis du lærte noe, så hadde vi satt utrolig stor pris på om du kunne gå inn på iTunes og gi oss en anmeldelse. Det vil hjelpe oss veldig mye med å nå ut til flere som deg. Du kan abonnere på podcasten i Spotify og i iTunes. Du kan også melde deg på for å få en varsling for hver nye episode på Markedsføringspodden.no. Har du et spørsmål eller et tema du vil ta opp på podcasten, så kan du sende det inn til oss på Markedsføringspodden.no. Ha en fin dag.